maybe they don't know how, right? They don't want to do it themselves. They don't know how. They don't know what the next steps are. They're overwhelmed, confused of what to do. But that's who I'm going to put my energy into because, it is sad, but there is a huge population that just wants the quick fix and they're going to keep searching for that, you know, most of their life. But for me, and I think what eventually might happen to people is the pain of, what is it, right? The pain of staying the same finally outweighs the pain of trying something different, right? And I think everyone eventually might get to their breaking point. Hopefully, for some, it's not too late.
What if your fatigue, digestive issues, or irregular cycles are not random, but your body warning you about burnout? In this episode of Give Yourself Some Leeway, I'm joined by holistic health coach and registered dietitian Carly Schade, who shares how her own burnout journey revealed the deep connection between chronic stress, hormones, and her overall health. She explains that burnout isn't just mental, it's biological. We dive into how cortisol impacts your body, the physical signs that are hidden and most women overlook, and how tools like cycle syncing can help you recover your energy. If you're a high achieving woman feeling exhausted, overwhelmed, or out of sync with your body, this episode is for you. Carly, welcome to Give Yourself Some Leeway. It's great to have you here on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here because when we first were talking, you helped me understand, let's say, when I first went through burnout, I heard a lot about how women experience burnout differently to men. But when I was looking for burnout recovery and what is burnout, there were not many men speaking about burnout. So, uh, what was burnout like for you in your experience? Because I know that how people experience burnout can be different from person to person, but I'm not the best person to describe how a woman goes through burnout.
That's fair. Thank you for acknowledging that. This is a great question, and I'm actually really glad you asked this because I'm going to share kind of two things. So, number one, what burnout looked like for me, and kind of why that has expanded my definition of burnout to kind of an umbrella diagnosis. So, when I was deep in burnout, still at my old job, it definitely started as the urgency. Everything was important. I kind of say, looking back, it was like everything was on fire all the time. I think I noticed, like, even if we had a group meeting, right, there was this as soon as a meeting was over, I knew I had like a task. And there was just this like surge of adrenaline that came. And what I realized is that was actually just like my body was so tired that it needed this cortisol spike, this adrenaline spike to get anything done. So every single task, big or small, was always urgent, always like the most important thing in the world. So a lot of that classic like urgency and anxiety. But then what eventually happened is it started to manifest into physical symptoms. So there's nothing, no such thing as TMI with me, especially as a health coach. And so I had constipation, and that is something that a lot of women in general struggle with a lot more than men. And so that was for me digestive issues. And it actually makes sense because your gut, we know, is so important to your health, but it's also part of your enteric nervous system. And so it was kind of stuck in fight or flight. I literally could not let go. So for me, digestive issues was a huge thing. And then eventually it led to low progesterone and a lot of hormonal imbalances, which affected my period. So that was kind of the physical symptoms of how over the years it progressed. And I like that you asked that because, like you said, it looks different for everyone else. But I don't think people realize how physical burnout can appear. We often think it's just, the corporate, I hate my job. You can love your job and still be burned out. And this cortisol, this chronic stress wreaks havoc on our body. And that's where, so when I say, burnout, especially as a health coach, there are so many different physical symptoms, especially in the hormone world, that kind of fall under that definition for me.
I love how you pointed out about the loving the work while still burning out. So that was me. That was me in a nutshell. I was completely exhausted, and everyone's like, "Oh, you burnt out," which means you quit your job, you go somewhere else. And I was like, "No, but I love the work that I do." I was like, just because I'm exhausted does not mean I hate the work. I'm stressed because I care about the work. And people, so everyone thought that once I burnt out, okay, this cycle is you burn out, you leave your job, you go somewhere else, and it might happen again. That was just the normality of it. We don't speak about this. But for me, I was like, no, no, I stayed there for another 3 years because I knew it was my relationship with work that was the issue. It was how I was not setting boundaries for myself. It was how I was showing up, the narrative I had when I was at work, when I was not at work. And that was what I needed to fix. Rather than looking at the work as the problem, it was something within me that I needed to change.
How did you know that? Because I
How
think
did I know
that's it
that?
for me. How did you know that without leaving and having those same patterns
So
follow you?
yes, so there were two reasons why I held on. So the first reason was because I knew leaving a job and the effort of going into a new job, I would have to have the mental, emotional, and physical capacity to find more work. And when I was burnt out, I was like, I'm too exhausted to process my own thoughts, what I'm feeling right now, what I'm going to have for my next meal. I'm not ready to sit in a job interview. But at the same time, I didn't want to quit my job because I enjoyed the work. I loved what I did. I was working in food microbiology, and I'm a foodie, and get me in food science. That's my jam. But I loved the work, so it didn't make sense to me that people say, "Oh, you're burnt out. You must hate your job." I was like, "No. If anything, I love the work, but it must be something else." And I realized that it was not the job itself, but it was my relationship with how I overworked myself, how the image and identity I had created for myself, seeking external validation. That why was I pushing myself harder than other people who were in the same line of work? And why was I feeling resentment towards those who were not working as hard as I was? What was happening there? So I didn't know it at the time, but I had to take a step back and really reflect on myself to be like, there must be something wrong here. If I love the work, but I'm still feeling this way, then something else is causing this. Something else needs to change.
Well, I think that is hats off to you because that is one of the harder things to do is you were able to default to the self responsibility, the reflection. I did not do that. I did love my job. I think it was time. It had been an amazing job. And I think when you originally love something, you don't think that all of a sudden it is going to change. That was me. But I could not take responsibility for how I contributed to burnout until the same pattern showed up. And that's when I left, because for me, also kind of to add to my diagnosis of burnout, my symptoms was blame. I was kind of like you said, the bitterness and the resentment of those not working as hard, but I was blaming everyone, right? I was blaming like the workplace culture for not being able to get it together and controlling everything and blaming my coworkers and my manager, who are some of my best friends also. I worked at this very tight-knit company. And so I kind of was like, I need to leave. I think I followed what most people do, where it's like, I'm going to quit my job and that's going to solve everything. And then here I started my own business, company of one, and all of a sudden the same patterns followed me. And so for me, that's when it was like, shit, the common denominator, sorry if I can't swear on this, but the common denominator is me here. And so I didn't reach that self responsibility, accountability until it was kind of smacking me in the face and there was no one else to blame.
I guess like your story is what I hear most of the time. Most of the
Yeah.
time, I felt like when I said mine, I was people are like, oh, normally we just quit. We quit and we go somewhere else. And then realize, okay, this is happening again and again. Maybe it can't be every workplace, it's, or we see in especially entrepreneurship, and we see people setting up their own business, and they just because it's again a company of one, and they're trying to be a jack of all, a master of all trades even. because of the perfectionism, the achievement, it all compiles. And then they say, I thought I left my job to do what my passion was, and now my passion is killing me. So where am I going wrong? What is wrong with me? And that's the narrative. It all comes back to the inner critic, to that blame of why is it always me? Why is everything always going wrong for me? Why can't I do what everyone else does?
Yeah. And yeah, there's so much unwinding in terms of the mindset, the mental, the physical. Your worth is tied to productivity, the people pleasing. Like it's all those patterns and habits that, yeah, no matter where you are, they will follow you. And again, though, it is easy to kind of blame. Okay, I'm blaming my coworkers, and now maybe I'm blaming being an entrepreneur because being an entrepreneur is hard, and I have to do all these things by myself. And so some people never get to that self-reflection piece. So it is really important that, we have conversations like this and your podcast exists to maybe spark people to look in the mirror a little bit first.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that as well, because when I first started the podcast, it was because when I was going through my burnout, there were not many men speaking about burnout. And my take on that was, at first, when I burnt out, was men don't speak about burnout, so it must not be important. Whatever men experience as burnout, I know it's different to what women experience, but because men don't speak about it, then it must not be as big a deal. And then I discovered, okay, men don't talk about their feelings. When the guys meet up, they don't talk about what's going on in their lives. It's always like my partner saying like, "Oh, how's like his wife? How are the kids?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I don't. We talk about sports or we talk about games. We don't talk about our personal lives." And that's just how it is if you're not aware enough or vulnerable enough or transparent enough to open up about your feelings. And that's just the way it is for a lot of men. So I said when I started the podcast, I wanted to document my own experience because I didn't see any other men speaking about this, so I could at least speak from my own experience. And while it was still fresh and raw, I could document that. So if I ever felt like I was dismissing it or downplaying my experience, I can go back and I can listen to how I felt almost 6 years ago. And I can bring back those feelings and be like, okay, this is how serious it was. This is how it felt to be in that moment. So it was not only a tool for me, but maybe if someone else could resonate with what I was sharing, then it might help them get the help they need. And that was the win for me. And when I first released the podcast, 90% of the feedback I got was negative, like horribly negative, saying
Really?
you're ruining your life. This is career suicide. No one talks about their mental health around here. No one's going to want to employ you. They're going to think that you're like a nut job, that you're a mental case because you've burnt out. And I'm like, I I mean, it's not like I had a emotional outburst and went on a rage. I was like, no, if anything, I just said I got burnt out at work, had to take some leave, took about 4 weeks. I was given 4 weeks leave to say, take 4 weeks, you'll rest and recharge, and then you'll come back and you'll be back to normal. That didn't happen. That was not enough. If anything, I just blamed myself for those 4 weeks, being like, how could you let this happen to yourself? You're putting all the work on all of your colleagues. It's so shameful and all this. While my colleagues are just working as usual and being like, oh, Eugene's not out sick. I wonder how he is, but that's as far as the thought went. But all of this negative backlash, if I had not done the work of self-reflection and a bit more awareness, I would have buried my head in the sand, took everything offline, been completely embarrassed, and just waited for it all to blow over and everyone to forget. But because I knew that what they were saying to me was a reflection of how I was making them feel. I was bringing up feelings and emotions that they did not address, that no one around them would talk about. And they would prefer if I just, buried them again and be like, you know what, stop ruffling these feathers and bury those emotions again because we don't talk about that around here. And if anything, it fueled me more. The more negativity I got, I said, okay, these people are really not comfortable with this because no one talks about these topics. So I need to talk about these topics more so that it's more normalized. So there's more conversations. So there's more openings to have conversations. And someone reached out and said, Eugene, kudos to you for doing your podcast thing, but we know what you're like. We've worked with you for years. You're this psychotic guy who gets up at 3 a.m. to go to the gym before working a 12-hour shift and then having other projects. I was doing 2 university degrees after a 12-hour shift in the evenings as well. And they're like, your routine is psychotic. So whatever you did to recover from this is probably just as psychotic. So it's not going to work for me. I was like, okay, I'll take that at face value as what my approach might not be a cookie cutter approach, but am I the only person to ever feel this way? Am I the only person to ever feel overwhelmed, stressed, or burnt out at work and found a way to overcome that and find a new way of living? So then I reached out as I found you and many other people being like, hey, I have give yourself some leeway. It's a free space to share your stories. If you ever felt stressed, burnt out, or overwhelmed at work and found a way to overcome that, this is a safe space to share that. And that's where the podcast has evolved. I know I'm ranting here again,
No, I
but
love it.
it's so now we have about 170 episodes, over 100 guests, and I'm like, okay, over 100 people have shared their story about how they've overcome this. So I'm not the only one. I have enough evidence to say that. And there's not just one cookie cutter approach. There's many ways, but the pattern is that if you don't recognize it and take that responsibility to say, no one is going to fix this for me, I need to be the one to take the first step, whether that's I do it myself with sheer willpower, I build the systems to do it, or I get guidance to help me along the way. That decision is up to me.
Yeah, you're right. It's what is that like? I think it was the 12-step program of like denial, right? You have to get over denial. And you are right because burnout happens in as we've learned, right? Your burnout looked very different than my burnout because it is attached to that person, right? What was the beliefs that we carry? What are the the values that we have? So of course it's going to look different for everybody, and the road back to it is going to look different because you have to work through those specific beliefs, attitudes, values that make up you, that make up me. So yeah, I mean to have a podcast that you get to see this massive way of all the different ways to heal is incredible. And I love what you said too of the 4 weeks, because that is something that's really common, especially like nobody ever wants to hear this, but time is so important when it comes to healing from burnout. It's like you've been living this way for 20 years and you think 4 weeks is gonna change everything. It's gonna take time. And I think that is something that people don't also give themselves enough grace is everyone wants the quick fix and they don't realize that you're really having to address some of these again, these rooted beliefs, these values as part of who you are that you've been living for most of your life.
Yeah, that was one of the most difficult parts. And I'm glad that I've logged that for how it made me feel. So that even when I try to downplay it, or let's say you kind of um, make a more mellow version of the story as time goes by and say, oh, I was exaggerating or being dramatic. It's like, no, this is how raw it felt at the time. And when I had the first 4 weeks off, it was like, okay, what's this burnout thing? I've never heard of it before. When I had my first, so it all happened. I had a panic attack at work, and I thought I was having a heart attack because I didn't know what this was. I was like, I can't breathe, I'm bent over. But at the same time, I did not want to ask anyone for help because I did not want to be seen as incompetent or weak. And even in that moment, I was like, if I was having a heart attack, I wouldn't have reached out for help for fear of being embarrassed or humiliated or seen as lesser than. So I knew that way of thinking was a threat to my own survival. If I felt I could not reach out to people I've been working with for almost 10 years, then how am I going to survive if you can't trust the people around you that much? So that was a big awakening for me that I was like, is it that I'm not trusting of others? Is it that I'm not trusting of myself? So all of these things came up when I did my self-reflection afterwards. When I was fortunate enough that after my 4 weeks, it was the start of 2020. So it was just going into lockdowns. So we had lots of shutdowns and everything that I was forced to stay at home. I was on my own. I was not able to go out and socialize. So I had to spend a lot of alone time to work on myself.
It's interesting that you have that timing because that is in how you're talking about you kind of have this record of what you were going through and then it also leading into COVID. There's some parallels in my story where I started journaling. I've never been really good at journaling. Like if I was on a vacation, I would write like an itinerary of what I did that day and like zero reflection, but I started to get better. And so I found an old journal from 2020 and it was from the lockdown. And so I'd worked for a travel company. And so we were very much, had to cancel 1,000 of our volunteers' trips. Like it was crazy. But so I wasn't working at first. And I read my journal and I said, like, I finally have been able to slow down enough to like have enough energy to walk outside and go look at the moon. Like I had said something like that, where like I was living in this apartment and I finally had enough time, right? Things had slowed down. I wasn't at work that I could go finally appreciate like looking at the full moon. And and that showed me that I had also been, right? I had been so burned out back in 2020. And so same thing, COVID, the lockdown gave me this taste of like, oh, this is what it can feel like. Things can be different. Now then where my story kind of took a turn was then when COVID started to kind of loosen up and we started to go back to work. And I was at this job that I cared so much about. We had to lay off half of our staff. We went from 10 to 5. These are some of my best friends. We're working in this international organization. I had been working in Southeast Asia. And now all of a sudden we're trying to save the company, right? Because we had all these trips that we owe to people, but then we had to spend the money to keep our doors open, and everyone had that problem, right? So now all of a sudden I had a job that I already cared too much about. COVID happened. I had I realized I had been burned out, but then all of a sudden I had to just let all that go and ramp back up and try to work even harder to save this company, right? Like I felt like I had this responsibility. And so that really contributed to where my burnout just went so harsh in the physical symptoms and really those hormonal balances, like eating up my progesterone, was because then I stayed on for 3 more years. It wasn't until October of 2023 that I put in my notice. And of course, I gave them 3 months notice because, you know, but yeah, it's funny that COVID gave me that taste of realizing, you know, I need to calm down enough to be able to go enjoy the moon. But it kind of got worse. It kind of backfired because all of a sudden now I cared twice as much and had to work twice as hard and stayed on.
That was, I think, COVID in a way was like a grace period for some,
Hmm.
not in all industries, of course, but for some people when they got to be able to take a step back. And next thing it felt, oh, now we're going back to normal. And that was a big thing in companies saying, oh, we're going back to normal now, and we've got to make up for lost time. And it was like, we can never go back to normal. What's going to happen now is going to be a new normal. There is no going back. Everything has completely changed. How we see life, how we see our working habits. We've got people who realized, oh, I can do everything remotely, or I can at least very much do it hybrid. And then companies like, no, no, everyone get back in. We're going back to the way things used to be. But everything had shifted so much. And rather than trying to go back to normal and say, okay, let's say production went down 50%, they'd say, let's go up to 150% and make up for lost time. And as a result, people are literally flat out. They're burning out. They're leaving because they're being overworked. And there's been no like accounting for the stress and the grief and a lot of things that people went through during the COVID period, and now they're expected to work almost twice as hard, if not more. And then that all backfired. The next thing people said, I can actually get by doing less. I'm happier by doing less, and I don't need someone literally like chasing me with a stick to say you need to work 10 times as hard. And that backfired for a lot of companies. So that was a narrative that I appreciated when that shift happened with people, that they were like, oh, we don't need to be in the office as much as we used to. We can have a better balance between our life outside of the office and how we show up to the office. I don't need to be in the office 40 to 50 hours a week, but I can still get my work done in less time and spend more time with my family. The work can still get done to 100%, but I can also be there for my family. And taking all of these considerations in, there was no going back to the normal of 2018, 2019. There was a new way of working, and the resistance against that is what caused a lot of people to either say, um, for me, it was again that the high achieving came back for a bit, being like, okay, now there's more work. I'm getting restless again. I can do more work because there's an allowance for more work. Or, you know what? I actually needed the time to recover. And I realized that I can perform better in short bursts if I give myself the room and the capacity to recover a few days a week. Be it, let's say, I might work Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, maybe have an off day on Thursday, and then work Friday and Saturday because it was shift work.
Hmm. Rest is the most productive thing that we can do. And this, I'm glad you said that because that is why for women, kind of two things is one, my hope is that the shift that COVID caused can that there can be some similar shift, especially for women who are trying, because there is still a huge issue of women trying to raise their families, trying to hold down the home while still working, right? There's still a huge lack of flexibility, right? When it comes to there's a reason that I think senior level positions drop like 30% right around the time that women start to have children, because the corporate, the traditional world just does not allow for women to have that kind of balance and flexibility. But what you also said about right this rest, right? Let's push in these short bursts and then we get to rest. And that is exactly why I bring in cycle syncing, right? And so for those who don't know cycle syncing, right, your menstrual cycle as a woman, right? We have this unique pattern. Our hormones reset every 28 days. You, men, reset every 24 hours, right? It's like the sun and the moon. And why I use cycle syncing as a roadmap to recover from burnout is because it has a built-in rest period. So I'm going to give you a quick lesson on women's cycles. You said you wanted a women's perspective, so here we go. So women have four phases to their cycle. So the first is follicular, and it just happens like right after their bleed. And you could think of like an internal spring. Then we have ovulation, that's like an internal summer. Then we have luteal, which is like an internal fall. And then we have our menstrual, our bleed, what everybody typically knows. And that's our internal winter. And each phase has a specific superpower, right? That where based on what our hormones are doing, our brains are more primed to maybe be attentive to focus on, admin work, or we're more primed to be communicating and visible and outward, or we're more primed to be reflective and connected to our intuition, which is when our rest is. So what I like to say is like your power is in your period. Plan, outward, work, rest. And so if you follow your cycle, if you follow your hormones, it has a built-in time to rest. Granted, this is harder because the world that live in was designed around a man's biology. But if you can figure out how in other areas of your life, maybe it can't be your 9 to 5 job, but other areas of your life to tap into your kind of second clock as a woman and rest right during your period or tune into your energy, like that's how we start to keep this cycle going. Because a cycle, right, is a very efficient means of momentum. So that's why I have loved, like you said too, food science, all these things. I've used science as my kind of roadmap to recover from to burnout, right? I learned about how my body actually operates as a woman and why I kind of burned out in the first place because I wasn't following the natural rhythm, the natural wisdom that my body carries. And I think that's a huge, difference that is not talked about enough for women is we're burning out because it's a biological mismatch to how we're supposed to live.
I love that because again, me almost geeking out, but it's basically you're listening to your body. It's what people don't do is they don't listen to their body. And it's our body gives us a lot of warning signals. Sometimes it's just nagging us and poking us with a stick, and then it starts screaming. And then when the screams aren't enough, it's going to be like, okay, I'm going to pull the lever and it's coming to a grinding halt. And but oftentimes when it's just the nagging, we tend to ignore it. But when it starts screaming, we look for ways to dull the screaming. So if we're not getting enough sleep, reach for the NyQuil. If we're feeling a bit of pain, let's reach for the ibuprofen or the paracetamol. Any ways to get through the day. If we're not focusing, throw on some more caffeine. And we're always looking for what's the next supplement to make me feel better? What's the next thing I can add to make me feel better? When we're addressing the symptoms, we're addressing the pain points, but not the cause. I had a great guest on only during the week, and he showed it as the hair pulling. And he says, if you pull your hair, and if you were to treat the site of the pain, you would treat the scalp, because that's where you feel the pain. But the cause is whatever's pulling your hair. And
Hmm.
that's how we need to look at things is like you have to see where the cause is that's creating the pain. It may not always be at the source where you feel it, but you need to listen to your body and see where's the pain coming from and then go back from there. Where is the original cause?
Absolutely. Your body is always talking to you. And I like what you said. I said the same thing where my body finally was screaming so loud that I couldn't ignore it, and I say burnout happened for me, not to me, right? And I think that was for me. I am so connected to my body. I'm in tune with my rhythm. I'm in tune with my intuition, right? I have this self-trust. And that kind of wisdom only comes from the body. It only does. And like you said, even some of those earlier haters, right, who were so triggered by what you were saying, well, overthinking is underfeeling. And all of those people, including all of us, right, when we get stuck in burnout, stuck in our mind, is because we're refusing to feel something. So the way back to recovery truly is through the body. And so these symptoms, they're not random. And so whether it's a symptom that you're experiencing generally, right? Maybe it's constipation or things like that, or as a woman, right? PMS symptoms, hormonal imbalances, they're a wide variety, but I can guarantee that if you look at any woman in a room, she's going to experience the same few every single time. That's not random. That's just not your body hardwired that way. And, you know, that's the luck of the draw. No, that is your body talking to you. And like you said, in our system, in our healthcare, all that's like, go on birth control, right? Or take ibuprofen or all these things. And it's like, well, what if burnout? What if the mindsets that we carry? What if the values? What if just the way that we relate to work and life? What if those are actually some of the sources, but we're just treating it with a band-aid solution?
That's another thing I've noticed from healthcare, and especially with guests in healthcare. And they say it's based on what they've been taught in their medical training. They're always told how to treat the symptoms. That not we don't always look at the cause, but people are looking for the quick fix. You could give someone a 12-week program for how they can overcome this for good, but they're going to say, well, I have the pain right now and I want to get back to work. So what's the quick fix? What's the sugar pill I need to take in order to get back to my work? I can't take 12 weeks off in order to fix this for the rest of my life. But what's the quick fix? And that's what they sell what the market is looking for. And if people always look for the quick fix because they're sold a quick fix, then that's what they train people to do, is to give them what they want and not what they need.
Exactly. Yeah, and there are some people that are always going to want the quick fix. And I think in even the spirit of burnout, right? And as a provider who wants to help people transform their life and become healthier, I I'm not going to try to fix and convince those people. That is actually why I left conventional healthcare as a dietitian. I had someone come in my office and they didn't know why they were there, and all they wanted was a pill. And I was like, well, I prescribe food. I prescribe lifestyle changes. So this isn't going to work. And so I think, yeah, this sounds bad, but it's why I finally started my own private practice because I was like, I'm not here to waste my energy to risk myself of burning out again, trying to convince those who don't want to help themselves. And that sounds a selfish thing to say, but I'm here to support the people who are ready for something different. Maybe they don't know how, right? They don't want to do it themselves. They don't know how. They don't know what the next steps are. They're overwhelmed, confused of what to do. But that's who I'm going to put my energy into because, it is sad, but there is a huge population that just wants the quick fix and they're going to keep searching for that, you know, most of their life. But for me, and I think what eventually might happen to people is the pain of what is it, right? The pain of staying the same finally outweighs the pain of trying something different, right? And I think everyone eventually might get to their breaking point. Hopefully, for some, it's not too late.
What that brought me back to was my two most empowering phrases that I learned from my burnout that trigger a lot of people. And I've had people email me saying that they felt triggered by the sentence because of their narrative on it. And it was that no one is coming to save you, and I'm not here to save you. I'm not here to save anyone. And they were, for me, the two most strongest, most empowering things that I could have learned. Because no one is coming to save me means I need to take ownership. And that means I'm in full control. If I'm waiting for someone to save me, then that means I'm passing all control and power to them. But by understanding that I take full accountability, so whatever decision I make, I take full responsibility, and whatever result, I reap the rewards. I reap the results. If I take full accountability, I get the full reward. And I'm not here to save you gets rid of the hero complex, where if I'm looking for external validation by trying to save other people around me or being nice to avoid conflict, then that's not helping anyone. That's enabling people who are behaving in a way that leads to me resenting them, which does not help the relationship at all. Or it's me having a covert expectation of when I do help someone, that I expect them to validate me in some way in return without communicating it. Because if I say, oh, I'm only going to help you as long as you appreciate me afterwards, it doesn't hit the same. So they were the two biggest things I learned was that I'm not here to save you. But if you're there, if you want to help yourself and you need the guidance, I'm not going to take the driving wheel for you. I can sit in the passenger seat, I can sit in the back seat and give you guidance. But you have the steering wheel, you have the gas, you have the keys. I can give you guidance along the way.
Yeah, and that's exactly how someone's life actually changes, right? It's like you could teach a man to fish, and he can feed himself for his life. But that is triggering to a lot of people because they're just not ready. They're not ready for it. But that really is those feelings, those desires, especially clients I work with, right? Like we all want to feel good. We all want to feel alive. We all want to feel joy, peace, presence, all those things. But that only comes from you, right? And that's going to feel different for different people. And so it's a huge reason that with my new practice, intuition and self-trust are a huge part of it. Because yeah, you could tell someone what to eat all day, every day, but it is not addressing the whole person, the whole woman, the whole reason that those people burned out or have these physical symptoms, right? It's like you have to look at the whole person, and especially why my work bridges this kind of science meets soul. because the whole thing that we're all after, right? Feeling good, healing from burnout is part of like lighting our soul on fire again, right? It's like getting that spark back. And so just trying to sector things out so much into this piece and this piece, which comes back to treating the symptoms, that doesn't treat the whole person. So I love both of those sentiments because they are very, very true.
What do you think is something that people overlook a lot when it comes to burnout? For me, I feel that people we touched on the, let's say, the warning signals, or maybe they dismiss things, or they say, you know what, I can deal with that later. I've been dealing with these pains or these aches for a long time, but it's part of the nature of the job. Is there anything that you found that people like to dismiss or normalize as part of burnout or overwhelm or the stresses of everyday work?
We did talk about some in the beginning, right? Like if you love your job, how can you be burned out? Or right, that everyone is kind of spread too thin or everyone's tired. I think one of the biggest ones, and especially for women, this is going to kind of tied to the hormones, but is the fatigue aspect, and specifically the use of the word should. So it's an exercise that I actually have. I just finished kind of a group program, and during the call, I said, everybody get your pen and paper out and write down the word should in all caps, and now take your pen and write a big fat X through it. So maybe this is the aspect of maybe burnout recovery that gets overlooked, but it's thinking that we should have more energy. I should have more time. I should have, and not realizing your body is talking to you. So yeah, if you slept 7 hours and your body is still tired, then you need more than 7 hours of sleep. But we just constantly default to thinking that something's wrong with us. Or again, then we reach for the coffee, we reach for the Red Bull, whatever it is. So I think it's using that word should. I should go for a run, right? Women not realizing that pushing too hard when you're in the middle of burnout, chronic stress can actually backfire, especially in the second half of your cycle, cause you to gain weight, right? All these health problems. But we continue to tell ourselves, I should push harder. I should be able to do more push-ups. I was able to do last week. So it's a bit more maybe in the burnout recovery aspect of your question, but it's just using this word should and blindly ignoring what our body is trying to tell us and just listening to what everyone else has been telling us.
I love it. This is in the list of I have a list of words for, let's say, reshaping your reality, and
Okay.
it's so we have should have, would have, could have, maybe, probably. These are all like soft, either soft words or less self-blaming words that your inner critic loves because it means that you're not enough. If you can't make a commitment to something, oh, I probably should drink more water. I'll try to do that next week. I'll try to give up smoking. Whereas if you give yourself definite decisions, if you say, oh, instead of saying, I'm trying to give up smoking, you say, I don't smoke, then you're creating an identity of, oh, I'm not a smoker. So why would I be reaching for the cigarettes? Or why would I vape? By creating concrete narratives, even if you don't believe them at first, it's all a matter of habit. Instead of saying, "Oh, I should have not picked up a box of cigarettes after work. I should have drank more water before I left home." That if you replace this with like I'm going to drink a glass of water when I get to work, or I need definite or future promises. These are more definite phrases that help you to reshape how you discipline yourself because you're either creating promises for your future self and you're not going to let down your future self if you make a promise, or else you're reinforcing the identity that you want to become.
Yeah, it's almost like telling your body that it's not already here, right? I think that's, kind of a term with
Mm,
like manifesting, right? It's like you got to write it down like it's already here. And yeah, I think should and supposed to are very slippery slopes that can
yeah.
keep a person in this little jail when it comes to any sort of habit changing for sure.
Yeah, that's like the slippery slope of the shoulda, woulda, coulda, and I catch myself doing it sometimes, and I'm like, oh, I did it again, and it's catching myself and being like, how should I have phrased that? And then when
Mhm.
I think of how I should have phrased that, and here's me using should again, but when I find myself using what would help me, then I would say, yeah, it's I'm catching myself on my own words again, and now because I'm conscious of it, um, but I think of a phrase that is better suited to uh, what is a gift I can give to my future self. How can I rephrase this as opposed to me shaming myself, saying this is something you should have done, you could have done better, and instead say, I do this action because it helps me create a better life for myself in the future, or it will help me feel better tomorrow. If for your example with sleep, if I didn't feel good after 7 hours of sleep, I'd say maybe it's not just the sleep. Maybe there's other activities in my day that resulted in poor sleep or poor recovery. Maybe I did not drink enough water, or maybe I had a beer the night before or a glass of wine. Maybe that affected me. Maybe I had a can of Red Bull a little too late in the day to get me through, to give me an extra edge at 6 p.m., but might be affecting me the following morning, or might disrupt my sleep. So it's trying to for me, it's all about self-compassion. And instead of berating or criticizing my behaviors, it's acknowledging them, seeing them for what they are, and then being future focused on how could I improve that going forward? How can I not let that happen again?
We say something in our household of, yeah, like what would future Carly thank you for, right? And it
Mm.
can be easy because even actually just last night I'm gearing up to work this big wellness block party this weekend, and I have a lot of materials to prepare for, and I was working till about 6, and then I came home and I was eating dinner, and I was about to gear up to get back to work at like 8 o'clock, and I was like, you know what? Getting a good night's sleep is going to allow me to, it will take me half the amount of time today because I rested. And that's exactly what one of my kind of core frameworks is, teaching people to manage their energy, not just their time. And again, kind of comes back to our cycle, but that's a big thing, is we're so used to trying to have the exact same output every single day. And it's a huge thing that comes back to burnout. We are human beings, and especially as women, we don't have the same output, right? Men can get away with that a little bit more. That's why the same routine every single day, eating the same foods kind of works out for you guys. But trying to do the same output every single day is also one of the biggest things that is, pushing us into burnout, preventing us from feeling good, feeling healthy, is that part. And kind of coming back to about the should part of the word is burnout recovery, right? I think maybe part of my advice for people is removing the word should, and especially listening to your body even when it doesn't make sense. And I think you might agree with too, of unlearning is a huge part of burnout recovery. And so that's what I use women's body education, right? Teaching you about your cycle, things that I did not know as a 28-year-old woman years ago, right? That all of a sudden it's like the way that we eat, the way that we work out, the way that we plan, the way that we work, all of these things are different based on our biology. And so it's a very science-backed permission slip to unlearn things that they've been taught, and to start to tune into their body and let things go even when it doesn't make sense. And so then if they can start to learn a little bit about their body, and oh, okay, well, this isn't true anymore, right? I now know this about my body. This evidence I was following was based on a man's body. So what else in my life can I let go of? And that's where those habits change. I call it like rewriting the rule book. So I kind of use understanding your body and a woman's biology as this Trojan horse into, lifelong transformation. And that happens with burnout, comes with health, but letting go of, like we said, those beliefs, values, attitudes, that allowed us to burn out in the first place.
I love that. It's the kind of listening to your body for how it's reacting, but then acknowledging whether it's serving you or not as well as when you're rewriting the rule book. There was one thing I noticed. I uh, I work as an engineer now also, and I do a lot of traveling, like worldwide traveling. And I noticed one thing that I did when I got really stressed out in the project was that I'd go and I'd buy chocolate peanuts and I would just eat chocolate peanuts every night. And next thing I realized, I'm buying lots of chocolate peanuts. And then when I'm not on project, I don't eat chocolate peanuts at all. And I realized chocolate peanuts happen when I'm stressed. Are chocolate peanuts good for me when I'm stressed? No. They might be a good comfort food, but they're not actually serving me in the long term. What could I do instead of having chocolate peanuts? What else could I do that could help to downregulate that stress? Okay, maybe I can go for a long walk, find a forest or find somewhere in nature where I can go for a walk and maybe bring a bottle of water with me and see does that work? Okay, that works for a while. Great. Is that better than me getting chocolate peanuts all the time? But then when I catch myself getting chocolate peanuts in the future, I acknowledge and say, okay, I picked up the chocolate peanuts again. What does that mean? It means I must be stressed. Let's go back to the walks again. But I don't berate myself for picking up the chocolate peanuts in the first place. It's when I catch myself and say, "Oh, this is a trigger. This is a red light to say I must be getting stressed on the project again. So how can I replace this bag of chocolate peanuts with something a little healthier or a better habit or activity?" So I like that way of rewriting the rules.
Yeah, and it's a great and everyone's gonna get to rewrite their rules in their own way, right? But the chocolate peanuts, it's a great source of information, right? Instead of being, I have these again. It's like, oh, now I know exactly what to do and how to do something different. You've shifted that into becoming almost like a stop, right? It's like, okay, now it's a pattern interrupt. I recognize
Yes.
the peanuts and now it's time to do something different. That's great.
Carly, is there anything that we haven't covered yet? Is there any message that you want to give to women out there who may be experiencing burnout or stress or overwhelm? Maybe they're going through the signs or symptoms, but they don't know where to begin.
We've covered a lot of really good stuff. And this is not going to maybe feel like it's related to burnout, but hopefully, if they've listened this far, they're going to understand that women's symptoms and women's hormones are absolutely related to burnout, right? My chronic stress is what ate up my progesterone. So, my advice or my message to women is that these really nagging symptoms that everyone has always told you are just part of being a woman, right? The chronic fatigue that absolutely can be part of burnout, feeling like days before your period, your body, you have no control over it, the bloating, the cramps, the digestive issues, all these things that we just kind of carry with us all the time, especially again the chronic fatigue. They're not normal and they are not just part of being a woman and they are related to the way that we're living is not in line with how your body works. So that's my thing is just anyone that tells you it's normal, a doctor, a nurse, whoever, please don't take it at face value because it is possible to feel better, to get that spark back and feel connected to your body again.